When you think of Dominique Wilkins, you think of the windmill dunks that brought the house down. You think of the iconic number 21 Hawks jersey. You think of the toe-to-toe battles with Larry Bird, 57-point playoff explosions, and one of the most electric scorers the game has ever seen. But his own son didn't know any of that. And that's not a joke, that's not an exaggeration. What happens when the weight doesn't carry over to the next generation? What happens when even your own child doesn't know how truly great you really were?
Dominique is going to jam! What a game, Dominique Wilkins. Rivers backs it out, picks it up, bounce pass to Wilkins to the hoop, dunks it.
You at 17, me at 17, who's better? Don't get it twisted.
Dominique Wilkins, the human highlight film, had a moment with his son Jacob, a young rising basketball star in his own right. And what came out of it wasn't just a father-son chat, it was a quiet reminder of something deeper. The game's greatness doesn't always echo forward unless someone carries the sound. It all started with an innocent question, a moment between father and son. Jacob Wilkins, now a 4-star recruit and one of the most exciting young high school players in Georgia, looked at his dad in the eye and said, "Dad, you at 17, me at 17, who was better?"
But he said to me, he went for his first unofficial visit to Georgia, because he's going to Georgia after this season. And he said, all the coaches was there, and he said, "Dad, you at 17, me at 17, who's better?"
Now pause for a second. Imagine asking that question to Dominique Wilkins, a Hall of Famer, 9-time All-Star, career 26.4 points per game scorer, one of the 50 greatest players in NBA history, a man who once dropped 57 points in a playoff game, and who many say had the most explosive vertical of any small forward ever. But to Jacob, Dominique was just dad. And like most teenagers do, he sized himself up against his old man, not knowing he was comparing himself to a literal legend.
I said, "Listen, son, if that makes people think that you're going to make a whole lot of money and do very well, I'm all for it, son. If that makes you think that you're better, you're absolutely right. You're better." I said, "But don't get it twisted."
There was no ego in it, no bitterness, just a measured truth. Because if we're talking resumes, Dominique Wilkins' name deserves to be whispered with reverence. Here's the thing about legacy, it doesn't always get passed down automatically. Especially when you're not in the highlight reels or social media clips the younger generation scrolls through daily. Dominique's son never saw his dominance in Atlanta. He didn't witness the soaring one-handed dunks or the duels with Bird at Boston Garden. He didn't sit courtside as his father dropped 30 a night with effortless grace. He never saw the tape. And because of that, Jacob didn't fully understand the weight of the name Wilkins. It's not Jacob's fault. And that's what makes this story so fascinating. Because Dominique never talked about his glory days, not in detail, not to boast, not even to his own son. But why? Because he wanted Jacob to chase his own greatness, not live in someone else's shadow. But even when you don't talk about it, greatness finds a way to whisper. But if we're really going to break down the numbers, let's do that. Jacob proudly told his dad he averaged 18 points and 11 or 12 rebounds in high school this year. That's legit.
Because I said to him, I never talked to him about my high school career a lot with him, right? I said, "What did you average this year?" He said, "I averaged about 18 and 11 or 12. I said, "That's great numbers for high school at any level."
Yeah.
He said, "What did you average?" I said, "I did okay." I said, "I averaged 30 and 16.
He like, what?
I said, "Don't get it twisted, son."
Mic drop. Back in the late 70s, Dominique played at Washington High in North Carolina. He wasn't just good, he was dominant, and everyone knew it. A raw combination of athleticism, footwork, and an instinct that rarely exists in teenagers. And it translated immediately. By 1979, he committed to the University of Georgia. By 1981, he was SEC Player of the Year. By 1982, he was the 3rd overall pick in the NBA draft. And soon after that, the rest was highlight reel history. But to Jacob, who was born long after the NBA battles, after the All-Star MVPs, after the Naismith Hall of Fame induction, that legacy wasn't a story. It was sort of a myth in the household. But here's what makes this story beautiful as well. It's not about comparison, it's about continuation. Jacob Wilkins isn't trying to be his dad. He's carving out his own path. At Grayson High School in Loganville, Georgia, Jacob helped lead the Rams to their very first state championship. He's ranked as a 4-star recruit. He's had offers from programs like Virginia, but in the end he chose Georgia, just like his father. And for Dominique, watching his son choose Georgia wasn't about nostalgia. It wasn't about rerunning his own story. It was about witnessing a new chapter. He said that watching Jacob grow and earn his own spotlight has brought more pride than anything he could have ever done on the court himself. And that's powerful. Because greatness isn't about the numbers, it's about the impact. And now Jacob is beginning to write a legacy of his own. This story also goes beyond the Wilkins family. This is a perfect reflection of a larger problem in basketball culture today. Too many young fans and even players don't know the game's history. They know the memes, they know the highlights, they know the LeBrons, the Currys, the Giannis's of the world. But ask them about Bernard King, or Sidney Moncrief, or Bob McAdoo, or Dominique Wilkins in this case, and you'll probably get blank stares. We're living in the most informed time in history, and somehow the knowledge of the game's roots is being lost. This isn't about gatekeeping or being old school. It's about preserving the greatness that made the game what it is today. And Dominique's story is a perfect example of that. Even his own son, under his own roof, didn't fully grasp how elite his father was until recently. And why? Because greatness doesn't always look much when it's older, slower, and tucking you in at night. It's hard for any kid to imagine their dad as one of the best athletes to ever live, even if that dad once battled Larry Bird in a Game 7 scoring duel for the ages. So what do we take away from all of this? It's not about comparing generations. It's not about stat lines or highlight reels. It's about remembering, honoring the past, telling the stories. Because legacies like Dominique shouldn't fade. They should fuel the next wave of greatness. Jacob Wilkins is carrying that torch now. Not by mimicking his father, but by creating something new, something personal. And if you're a young hooper or a young fan watching this, remember, the game didn't start with you, but it can continue with you if you just take the time to learn where it came. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more long-form videos about NBA legends, untold stories, and what connects the past to the present, hit that like button, subscribe, and drop a comment. Which legend do you think doesn't get the respect they deserve today? Let's keep the history alive. Thanks for watching. This is Basketball Network, and I'll see you in the next one.